Good morning. Welcome to the Point. When 3rd District Congressman Justin Amash announced he would run as an independent, not a Republican, the floodgates opened for both GOP and Democratic candidates vying for their party's nomination. In the next few weeks, we'll introduce you to a number of people who say they'll run. Some have already been in and out of the race, and it's no guarantee that all of the declared candidates will actually make the ballot. But the race is already heating up, so is our coverage. We begin each interview by asking about the candidate's background. We start with Peter Meijer.
So I'm a proud 4th-generation West Michigander. Fred Meijer was my grandfather and really my hero growing up, and he inspired me to take a pathway towards service throughout my life. So after I graduated from high school in Grand Rapids, I went off to serve in the military. I was in the Army Reserves for 10 years. I deployed to Iraq during college, working in an intelligence unit in the Baghdad area. And then after I got back from Iraq, finished up college, I spent time in a disaster response group called Team Rubicon, which mobilized military veterans to respond to natural disasters. So I was in South Sudan during a refugee crisis, New York during Hurricane Sandy, Moore, Oklahoma during a series of devastating tornadoes, and then finally in the Philippines after the Typhoon Haiyan hit in 2013. From there, I continued a pathway into humanitarian aid, serving in Afghanistan for a year and a half with a non-governmental organization providing conflict analysis to humanitarian aid workers. So trying to help those who are helping the needy stay out of harm's way. Came back after that to pursue a master's in business administration, came back to West Michigan and was involved in real estate development between Grand Rapids and then a little bit of time in Detroit as well. And now I find myself here.
Given that resume, what brings you to run for the United States House of Representatives? And the council will be on each of these interviews with all of these candidates that part of the reason, clearly, is opportunity. Because it will be neither a Republican nor a Democrat incumbent. If, in fact, Congressman Amash runs again, he has said he will run as an independent. So that does create an opportunity on both sides of the aisle. But beyond opportunity, why now?
I spent 3 years between Iraq and Afghanistan. I've seen that what the government does and what the government doesn't do, lives hang in the balance. And I firmly believe we need folks in Congress who understand the life or death implication of government decisions. Add to that, we have the first anti-war president we've had, I think, definitely in my lifetime, if not in any viewer's lifetime, and a real opportunity to change how America is perceived in the world. President Trump has already created an opportunity where we have stood up to China on trade and where we're working to end our wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, and I want to help him.
When you think about being one of 435 members, so you are 435th of one half of 1/3 of government. On one
Don't
hand,
ask me to do that fraction, please.
at one point, you are just one. But on the other hand, the right voices can have a big impact in Washington. How would you approach the job? How would you try to approach Washington, given the kind of division that you know is already there?
Yeah. I think every representative in Congress is only as strong as the support they have in the district. And I think in West Michigan, we share a lot of values on the importance of community, on the importance of finding long-term solutions to problems, and really on continuing to grow our strengths and addressing those challenges that still remain. So first and foremost, it's being a leader in West Michigan and being a leader in the community. I'm a Republican, but as a member of Congress, I'll be representing Republicans and Democrats and taking where we can on bipartisan cooperation to really try to eke out as much progress in these highly polarized times. I'm very proud of the growing number of post 9/11 veterans in Congress, folks who have put the country first before, and also share characteristics with folks on the other side of the aisle to be able to find common solutions. And that's what I want to pursue.
When you look at this district, and of course it'll be redrawn in just a couple of years, but when you look at it as it is comprised now, you have some pretty big discrepancies in economics from a Grand Rapids to a Battle Creek, for example. A lot of rural area that is involved there. What do you see as the biggest needs in the 3rd Congressional District, not so much in Washington, but here at home?
Yeah. Well, it's clearly continuing to grow our economy. I mean, Grand Rapids has been an island of prosperity in a state that's suffered through declines, but that prosperity and growth hasn't necessarily always been shared throughout the district, because you go from highly urban areas to highly rural areas, and they have different challenges and different problems. I mean, still, Calhoun County hit very hard by the opioid epidemic. If there's something that's unique to West Michigan, though, I mean, it's our belief and reliance on our natural environment here, on how, whether it's for recreation, tourism, or the economy, protecting the Great Lakes is a critical issue. And I think we're seeing the Republican Party beginning to understand that the path and approach they were taking to protecting the environment and managing our national resources in the past, that's no longer sustainable. We need to re-embrace a sense of sustainability within conservatism, both for protecting the environment and recognizing how dependent our economy is.
You talked a lot about trade and about the international viewpoint from your perspective of spending a lot of time overseas and obviously being in the military. But one of the other aspects of being in Congress is you control the purse strings. And you said you see an anti-war president for the first time in your lifetime. In my lifetime, I've seen every president that was elected promise to rein in spending, and none of them have. At some point, the interest on the national debt will become one of the largest line items in the federal budget to rival even perhaps defense. As a member of Congress, what could you do, what would you do to try to control spending?
There are no easy answers when it comes to controlling spending. I think we're spending around $300 billion a year just paying the interest on the debt, and that's roughly half of our Defense Department expenditures, which are in the $780 billion range. But that interest is going to continue to grow because we have a budget deficit approaching $1 trillion. Frankly, the Republican Party needs to practice what we preach far more often. We're really big fans of being fiscal hawks when we're in the minority, and then as soon as we retake the majority, we have these budget-busting bills that continue to get passed. I think a lot of it has to be done with reforming the appropriations process within Congress itself. So getting to the point where we don't need to have multi-billion-dollar programs in order to gain sufficient traction to pass a bill, but spending more time trying to have discrete budget passage. Right now, we leave everything up to these end-of-year omnibus bills that people treat like a Christmas tree. They hang every ornament they want on it, and that is not a sustainable path.
Got about 45 seconds left. You are now campaigning in the Republican primary. If you're successful, you'll be campaigning in the general election. You usually have maybe 30 seconds at the door to make an impression. So I'll end this interview with you making your pitch. Why are you running?
I've served my country in Iraq. I've served the needy overseas, and now I'm coming back to serve West Michigan and ensure that we retain a strong sense of West Michigan leadership and West Michigan values in Washington, D.C.
We're back with another candidate in the 3rd District next. To the Point. Welcome back to the Point. Emily Rafi is in the race for the 3rd congressional seat and has already changed from a Democratic candidate to a Republican. She explains, but first, her background.
I was born and raised in Battle Creek, Michigan. I'm a commercial banking attorney. So my background has primarily been in facilitating commercial transactions. And I'm a mother, a single mother, and I have also had quite a bit of experience in consumer protection law. So I have an interest in helping people alleviate financial stress out of their personal lives.
When you talk about running in a crowded field like this, there are a lot of things you have to take into consideration. And when you first came on my radar, you were running as a Democrat for the Democratic nomination. We talked just days ago, and you said, I'm still running for Congress, but I'm running as a Republican. What brought about that change?
Right. So that was a major change in my mindset. But I would like to point out that our platform has not changed at all. So what's interesting is when we designed our platform, which we published several months ago, the first primary concern was taxpayer protection along with consumer protection. We did not follow the typical Democratic platform of increasing taxes as a way of revitalizing the economy and creating opportunity. So it became clearer and clearer as we were running that our values, our positions were more aligned with Republican economic views and policies. And as the year has gone on, we found that the Democratic Party has moved further and further left. And I think that we felt we didn't really fit into the direction that the Democratic Party was headed. So we made the decision that we felt most comfortable moving into the Republican Party, and that's what we did.
So you've talked about a couple of things about economic issues and some protections. So what motivates you to run? Because this is a big step in anybody's life, and you could already tell stories, I'm sure, about being on the campaign, because it's a big job, it's a big undertaking. It's not just like, oh, I'm going to run and then you forget about it. I mean, it becomes a full-time job.
Right.
So tell me some of the other things, some of the other motivating reasons for you to run.
Mm-hmm. So I think, having gone through law school and practiced in law school, worked for the Federal Trade Commission, Division of Consumer Protection, I learned quite a bit about what goes into a healthy capitalist economy. And a lot of people, you'll hear a lot of rhetoric, especially right now, with the far left coming out of Congress very strong, that capitalism isn't working, we need to shift to socialism, or we need to shift to different socialist type models. And I think what people are missing is that capitalism requires maintenance. It's not a system that just works flawlessly without needing maintenance at certain points. And when those points arise, you are then to go in and make the proper tweaks, to make the proper adjustments, so that more opportunities are created, more competition is created, and that all ends up turning into a win for consumers and a win for taxpayers. So I think just the full spectrum of my education and work experience, having seen both the public sector and also worked in the private sector for the majority of my life, and assisted banks with transactions, as well as the personal component of my life. So I'm a mother, I'm a single mother. I was married and my husband died suddenly and tragically in a car accident when my son was 1 year old, our son. And I spent 10 years, 12 years raising my son on my own. And I think living life and seeing the struggles that people go through has to be a part of what you bring to Congress, because no one is going to advocate better than someone who's been in a position that they're now trying to resolve for others. So I think just the overall combination of my education experience and then life experiences have provided me with a skill set and a vision of what I can help people achieve in their own lives and try to improve the lives of Americans.
We don't know what the makeup of Congress will be after this election cycle. Mm-hmm. We do know that the districts will be redrawn just 2 years later, so there are a lot of unknowns out there. But if you were to be successful and get to Congress, how do you accomplish bridging that gap? Because you know how divided things are in Washington, and it's a division. It's not to say that there hasn't always been a certain partisan division, but it has reached a fever pitch in Washington. So how do you go in as a freshman and try to build coalitions?
If anyone's the perfect person to cross party lines in this election, I think I've demonstrated that. Our focus is on solving problems that Americans are facing. I am the least bit interested in a party affiliation as my identity. And I think to a lot of people, especially right now in the media, and you hear it so often, just on a surface level glance, I would be perceived as someone who would be on the Democratic side of the ticket, or someone that just visually looks like someone who would be in the squad, right? There's a stereotype that's perpetuated, and I think that the fact that I don't fit into that mold is really important, and it's really essential, because we need a message that the American dream is alive, it is attainable, and we need that to come from all types of people with all types of backgrounds. The division is really, it's a challenge, but I think if you're focused, it shouldn't matter. If you know that your goal is to help people, to help our economy, to do the right thing for this country, the division should mean nothing. And then it's up to the people who are elected to take on that mindset of, I'm not doing this for partisan reasons, I'm doing this to help the people of this country, and nothing should stand in their way with that goal. So
I give each candidate who comes in and does one of these kind of introduction interviews a chance to make their pitch. So if you got 30 seconds at somebody's door, what do you tell them when you're running for Congress?
So I'm running for Congress because we want to protect consumers and taxpayers from abuses. We want to help alleviate the stresses that have taken over certain parts of our economy. So, for instance, healthcare, the cost of healthcare, the cost of higher education. And we believe that the best way to do that is not to add additional regulation to the government, but to actually unwind the poor regulations that had been put in place prior to this. So I think, if you're interested in electing someone who is focused on the prize, getting it done, that isn't focused simply on a party name, and who understands that, going into socialism or putting more layers of government onto the problems we currently have is not the proper solution, then I think that would be my campaign and what we represent.
Yet another candidate next, to the point. Our third candidate this morning is Andrew Willis. We begin with his background.
I was born over on the east side of the state, Port Huron, and raised up in the Port Sanic area, and then later lived in Gladwin, Michigan. My dad was a carpenter, my mom was a school teacher. And in the 80s, I went to what is now Cornerstone University, worked in factories in Wyoming and Walker during that time while I was working my way through school. Later, I was a carpenter and then a licensed builder. And then I was asked to participate in pastoral ministry at a small, struggling local church congregation. And so I've been in pastoral ministry now for 2.5 decades. And so throughout my life, there was the growing up in the farm community, which gave me a sense of just the concerns there that family farms deal with. And then had the experience, to work in the factory, to work as a small businessman in a small town, and then to hopefully serve God and my fellow man in Christian ministry. And so I think that's given me a varied background as far as my hope of representing the people in United States Congress.
Well, let's start with that decision. So you decide to run. We've talked a little bit about your background, and you and I talked a little bit earlier about your family. All of those things that lead you to run, why did you decide to run now?
I've had a great interest in running in politics and being involved for many years, actually. So much so that one of my pastimes, I guess you'd say, is to read political biography and American history, especially American history. So there's been a constant interest there. I never felt like challenging, a sitting congressman of my own party. But the unique circumstances of what's taking place in the 3rd District with Justin Amash leaving the Republican Party and running as an independent, and even prior to that being challenged by some of his own party, I decided that now was the time to jump in. And I have children and grandchildren, and just a great concern for their future, that they might enjoy the kind of privileges and blessings that I have in the past. And so I felt a compulsion, I guess you'd say. That's all I can describe it as a compulsion to be involved as soon as I could.
One of the things that I find challenging for candidates is to imagine themselves in that role in Washington. We'll talk about what the role is in the district. But in Washington, you somehow have to combat what is harsh partisan rhetoric on both sides. Mm-hmm. You have to somehow try to bridge that divide when it comes to doing things that are right for your district. If you were successful in getting to Washington, how do you approach that? Because it's kind of a rough place.
Yeah, it is a rough place, and it's not an easy question. I was asked the same question on Monday evening when I spoke to the Kent County Young Republicans. And my honest answer was, because I've never been there, I can't truly imagine what it's like. I know that there are people who have gone to Washington, and after 2 terms they've had it, because they feel they can't really do anything with all of the bitterness and division that's there. So I don't want to pretend that I have an easy answer for that, but I do believe that things, even in my past as a pastor, have helped me to be prepared for that kind of a setting, because I have had to be uncompromising as to my principles and yet reach out to work with all sorts of people, and to not just work with them, but to truly try to love them. And so I don't want to sound naive, because I realize it's not that simple. It's not exactly the same as the pastorate, but just the kind of situations I've been in where I've had to deal with, you know, on the one hand, telling people truth they don't want to hear, only getting things done by bringing diverse people together and persuading them, and truly being friends with, truly friends with people who are very different than myself in various categories, you know, atheists, Muslims, evangelical Christians, which I count myself among them, among the evangelical Christians, Roman Catholics. You know, I have gay and lesbian friends who we truly care for one another. We're genuine friends, and so without compromising what I believe, I've had a fair bit of experience in working with diverse groups of people.
When you look at this district, you talk about diverse, it certainly is, and it spans a good geographic area that has very different characteristics from one end to the other. What needs to be done for the district, for the people in the district? What would you try to achieve in Washington?
Sure. Well, because of where we're at as a nation, I believe that, first of all, there are very fundamental concerns that I have, concerns that we remain a genuine constitutional republic, that we remain a sovereign nation that is secure, that we do everything we can to strengthen the reality of who we are as a constitutional republic. So there are fundamental things that I think need to be addressed, and previous generations of lawmakers have had, I think, the luxury of that being a given, that we're operating in a constitutional republic and believe in civil liberties and at least some sense of civility in public life. And so I think a lot of those fundamental things are threatened. So that's an area of concern. As far as the needs of this area, I think that the economy, of course, things that relate to the economy are always primary in the minds of people, and they are in mine as well, that people have, that we pursue the kind of policies that lead to economic growth, to people having good paying jobs and being able to find those jobs so that their future, you know, young people don't have to leave the area, and that there's an economic future for them. And then I think that alleviates a lot of the troubles that are part of our culture. I mean, I believe, as a Christian, that there are always things that are deeper than economic, and that they're primary, but the reality remains that when people have good jobs, there is less of crime and less of trouble in families, and, you know, the things that make a more stable society. So the economic things are our free enterprise system. I want to see more and more people have genuine access to that and benefit from that. I think that agriculture is a huge component in this third district. I was in a debate on December 2nd where agriculture was not mentioned. There was no question related to it, and yet it's a huge part of our life in the outlying counties. And I think that's something that needs the needs of the rural community, even though here we are in the big city of West Michigan, those needs need to be represented as well.
I always call this the door knock moment, because you have usually about 30 seconds when you go knock on somebody's door to make your presentation. So as we close out this interview, here's your 30 seconds. Why are you running? Why should people vote for you?
What I would like to focus on, as to the first reason, beyond just the things I stand for, is the way I'm operating my campaign. I've committed myself to accept no more than two $20 donations or contributions from any individual or entity. That means that I have a great uphill struggle against all of the money that's already been poured into the race. And so I would encourage people to go to votewillis.com to look at my 5-minute announcement video, which gives a picture of who I am, and if they'd be willing, I'd sure appreciate them donating $20 to my campaign. I want to belong to the people. Bought and paid for by the people is my campaign slogan. I want to go with all the people knowing that I belong to them.
In 2 weeks, we'll continue with the candidates from the 3rd. Next week, we'll wrap up the year in Lansing with Governor Whitmer. We'll see you at 10 o'clock Sunday morning for To The Point.